Hey, welcome back. Today I'm going to be reviewing the houses at HHN 32 in Florida. This is actually my first Halloween Horror Nights. I've watched videos of previous years, so I kind of had an idea of what it's like, but being there in person really blows away everything you'll see online. I did all of the houses twice, some of them 3 times, so I think I got a decent run through all of them. And I know based on some of the terrifying moments that I definitely got good runs through some of them. So first up is Chucky. I mean, it's good to start here, right? Because it can only get better. I'm only joking, partially. This house had some fairly mixed reviews online. I'd avoided reviews and spoilers before I went to the event to avoid biasing myself, so I don't think I was influenced by that. I'm not really a Chucky fan. I watched one of the movies on Netflix before I went to get an idea of what it's like though. The puppets for Chucky are really good. There's some kills from the movies and TV shows throughout the house. There's some that even I recognised. And the red button, if you press it when you're walking through, it's quite cool. It triggers an extra scare for those ahead of you. It's quite easy to miss as well. This house is also spread over 2 separate buildings. So there's a midway point where you pass through the outside, and there's an actor that has free to ad-lib lines and interact with you if you walk past, which is pretty neat. Overall though, I think it's just fairly meh. It's quite gory. It's kind of scary, but not super scary. And I think if you compare it to other IP houses like The Last of Us, even if you weren't interested in that IP, the house is scary and it still has some incredible moments that stand on their own, with things like the clickers and the bloaters, whereas I don't think Chucky really had that. Well, the good news is things can only really get better from here, I guess. Next up is Universal Monsters. This was actually the first house I did and my first ever Halloween Horror Nights experience. The walk up to this one is quite long. It takes you past Yeti, and you can see The Last of Us in the background as you walk up to it. I think most people will have heard of the characters, even if you're not really into Universal Monsters. This house this year featured Jekyll and Hyde, the Invisible Man, Hunchback, and the Phantom of the Opera. One of my main memories of this house is how dark it is. The first time I went through it was during Stay and Scream, so it was still light outside I guess, and my eyes hadn't fully adjusted or something, because I couldn't really see anything, and I made it through by following the person in front of me very closely. Thankfully though, that wasn't a problem on my next walkthroughs, because there's a bunch of really cool stuff to see and even smell in this house. It's set in Paris, and as you walk through, you see a spine getting ripped out, and Quasimodo literally falling down from above you, which is a really cool moment. Funnily enough, one of the scares that got me best here was the lady with the baby buggy lunging forward as you walk past. Whilst not my favourite, I think this house was really well put together, and it had some pretty neat moments. Now on to The Last of Us, which I've mentioned a few times already, and the house I was really looking forward to the most. I'm a big fan of the games and the TV show, and this is probably one of my favourite games of all time actually. And it's fair to say that this house didn't disappoint. It's incredible. Waiting to get into this house, you hear Gustavo's iconic theme song playing, and it just really sets the mood perfectly as you're waiting to get in, no matter how many times you hear it on loop during the fairly long wait this house had. There's a bunch of set pieces from the game that are perfectly adapted into the house. You start in Pittsburgh, just after Joel and Ellie are ambushed and crash into the store, and you see the car having crashed into the store, and you get your first look at Joel being attacked by a raider as you start the house. As you continue on, there's a puzzle from the hotel area in the game that's been adapted into the house. So it's the part where you need to get through a locked door by finding a key card and starting a generator, and both of those props feature in the house. My biggest oh wow, this is incredible moment was walking through the toilets where the spores fall from the sky, and you can see in here Joel putting on a mask via a projection on one of the walls. A fun Easter egg in this part is that there's a dead body under the sink, and it has a Firefly medallion on. That's a collectible in the game. It's pretty cool that they added things like that, because no one's going to notice it walking through in the dark, but it was pointed out to me on the behind the scenes tour. It's a really neat touch. Moving on to the clickers area, not only are the prosthetics on the clickers incredible, as you walk through that part, there's fine strands hanging from the ceiling that brush up against your face like cobwebs as you walk through, and it's a really cool moment as you're wiping your face, wondering out what's touching you, and it really feels like there's tentacles of the spores and the mould falling down on you. And finally, as you get to the end of the house, you encounter the bloater, and this was one of the scariest moments in all of the event for me. As when I was walking through that part of the house on one of the runs, the bloater stood in front of me and screamed, and I couldn't get past, so I had to wait for him to finish and move before I could go. That was easily one of the standout moments for me. So overall, I think this was quite easily my favourite IP house. It was incredible. Now, let's talk about The Exorcist next. I've never seen the film, but I'm kind of familiar with the basic idea of the story. And I agree with everything that I've heard other people say about this being the scariest house. This one was terrifying. And when I was on the RIP tour, the guide waited for us at the exit. She didn't want to go through it again. This one starts really strong. There's a really strong smell as you walk in through a market scene with the Exorcist music playing, and there's some creepy dolls before you enter the first scene with some jump scares of people popping out of the woods calling out for missing children. You then end up walking through various rooms in the house. It's dark, claustrophobic, and there's creepy possessed children jumping out at you with flickering red lights. And the highlight is a live exorcism towards the end. I don't think this is the best house, but it's certainly the scariest for me. Wrapping up the IP houses is probably the most popular one with Stranger Things 4. This isn't the first Stranger Things house they've done, but I've never been to any of the other ones to compare it to. This house is based on season 4 of Stranger Things and features various set pieces from the Netflix show. You start off going through Eddie's trailer and you see Christy suspended in the air on your right as you walk through, and then stepping outside you find Vecna putting out some washing in the garden. The Vecna prosthetics are truly amazing. The level of detail on them is incredible, and they're on par with the clickers in The Last of Us. Midway through the house is one of the best sets that's actually quite easy to miss, and I did a few times. There's a hole in the ceiling showing Dustin standing above with a bedsheet rope, that moment from the TV show, but you have to look up and see the hole in the ceiling of the room. I like Stranger Things, but I'm more of a casual fan than a diehard. But I really like this house. Vecna was great, it had some really great scenes, and it was scary, but not overly scary. One of the best parts of any house this year has to be Dustin and Eddie battling the Demogorgons as Master of Puppets plays, just like in the show. That's a really incredible scene towards the end of that house. So that's the first half of the houses covered. The final 5 we have are all original concepts, and to me the original houses were a real highlight of the event, and it's incredible to see what they come up with from scratch, basically. Duelling Dragons probably sounds familiar to anyone who's been going to Universal Studios for a while, and this house is based on the queue from that ride that was replaced by Hagrid's. My opinion on Duelling Dragons flip-flopped with every run-through I had. I think if I didn't have nostalgia for the ride, then I would have enjoyed it far less, but it is a decent house. It's more fantasy than scary, really. You start off walking through a forest that has some really cool magic effects. There's lights that shoot through the scenery around you, showing you how the fire and ice spells are being cast, and that's really cool. And then as you walk through the house, there's various entrances to the castle, and one of the really cool ones has the fire and ice dragon sitting atop, which is really cool. At the end, the unique thing about this house is that you get to choose your fate, and either go down the ice or the fire path. Based on the path you choose, and the cast who's performing at the time you walk through the house, the ending changes, so there's a total of 4 possible endings of this house. This turned out to be one of my least favourite parts of the house, actually, though. I think the time I went through and chose fire, there was a cast change or something, because there are no actors, and I had no idea how it ended. The next time I chose ice, and I did see the ending, but it's not super clear what's happened as you're hurriedly walking through the house. It's a cool concept, though. Overall, I think this was a fairly good fantasy house. It wasn't particularly scary, it had some nice effects, and it was neat to see it being based on an old ride. Next to Dueling Dragons is Yeti Campground Kills. I don't really have a lot to say about this house. I thought it was pretty enjoyable, and there's some decent jump scares. The hand clawing down at you as you pass the lake is pretty neat, and there's some really dense stuff in your face as you pass through the sleeping bag material towards the end at the campsite. If you haven't seen Molly's run through yet on Mammoth Club, I highly recommend checking it out. Her interaction with the scare actors is really great. I think she has a point. Billy is the bad guy here, not the Yetis. Overall, this is a fine house. It has some cool set pieces, some scares, and it was good fun. If you're new to Halloween Horror Nights like me, you probably didn't know this either, but there's 2 types of buildings for the houses. Everything I spoke about so far are in sound stages, these like proper permanent buildings that host the houses. The next 2 I'm going to talk about are tent houses, and as the name suggests, they're housed inside large tents in the park. Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins is based on the icon for HHN 32. Icons are basically characters that the event is themed around, and they have significant amounts of lore and storytelling based around them. Dr. Oddfellow's deal is that he wants to be immortal, and he does that by collecting souls. This sounds great, so we go back after dark to visit his carnival at night. The house is pretty cool. There's a bunch of your standard jump scares, and the carnival theme is really well done. There's a particularly neat part where you see a head get cut off and the headless body charges towards you. That's really neat. If you've been going to Halloween Horror Nights for a while, I imagine this house will be even cooler for you, as it shows the backstory and the origin of Jack and Oddfellow, and you get to see Jack being put into his box via a projection on one of the walls as you walk through. Overall, I think this is a fairly decent house. Not one of my favourites, but it was good nonetheless. Right next to Oddfellows is The Darkest Deal. This house tells the story of a musician called Pine Straw, who sold his soul to the collector in exchange for fame and success as a musician. Initially, I wasn't too keen on this house, but after going through it a few times and doing the behind the scenes tour, this house really grew on me. I think my main issue initially was that it's fairly hard to follow the story and appreciate the details as you're moving through quickly in the dark. But once you know it and you can follow along, it's really quite cool. The facade of this house is really cool as you walk in. There's a cool effect where you see the contract getting signed, along with a strong earthy smell that really sets the tone. As you progress through, you see Pine Straw experiencing the success that he was promised, and then gradually you see him turn it into one of the collector's demons, before being imprisoned in a wall along with all the other artists who made a deal with the collector. Overall, I came to really enjoy this house and the story it tells. It's got some really great scary moments and some great details once you know where to look. Finally, we get to the last house, Bloodmoon, which is certainly my favourite original house, and I really can't decide if it overrides my love for The Last of Us to take the spot for the best house overall. Bloodmoon is set in a colonial era village, and the set design here is incredible. As you walk through the village, you see your future as you catch glimpses of other guests ahead of you walking through future parts of the set, and this is really unique to this house. A bunch of the villagers have decided to worship the moon, and one night a blood moon appears, and they take this as a sign that they must kill any non-followers, who they call the false-hearted, and sadly, that includes you. As you enter the courtyard, you see children dancing around a maypole made of human flesh, which is really something. And as you continue on, you see a bell tower with a scare actor overlooking everyone, which is really quite cool. And you can make eye contact with him, and he points the way forward. It's really cool seeing him survey the entire house up there. Towards the end of this house are two of my favourite scenes in all of Halloween Horror Nights. Sitting on benches in a church are a mix of mannequins and scare actors, and you can't tell who's who. They're all cloaked and hooded, and you must walk down the aisle past them, waiting to see which ones jump out at you. I found this particularly scary, even more so than the normal jump scares out of boo holes. And then at the end, there's a similar setup in a room where you have to walk past a bunch of them, standing on both sides of the corridor. There's not a whole lot of room. You're basically just a hair's width away, and you have to walk past them unaware of which are actors and which are dummies, and you're constantly waiting for them to move. These last two types of scares were easily my favourite. With the jump scares, you're always looking ahead, trying to see where they might pop out, but with these, you feel much closer to the actors, and you know as you brush right past them, any of them could move. I'm not sure if it's just me, but this house also gave me Resident Evil 4 vibes, with the village and the clock tower at the start of that game. I haven't seen anyone really talk about that. Overall, I think this was my favourite house. It wasn't the scariest, The Exorcist keeps that honour, but in terms of story, theming, and set design, this one really wins it for me. And that wraps up my review of all the houses at HHN 32 in Orlando. As I said, this is my first time at the event, and I thought it was really incredible, and I'm already making plans to go back next year. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about the houses, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe.